What happens? What happens?
What happens when everything goes wrong?
There'll come a time when divorce becomes a plague and marriage a primary symptom. When kids grow up living double lives and we brand them two-faced. There'll come a time when divorce becomes a plague and marriage a primary symptom. When kids grow up living double lives and we brand them two-faced because mom and dad have issues. What happens when everything goes wrong? There'll come a time when election time becomes synonymous with genocide. As trails of blood lead many to the polls to cast their votes using crutches and wheelchair mindsets. When the taste of freedom is nothing but blood dangling on our lips. What happens when everything goes wrong?
What happens when everything goes wrong? I will tell you what happens when everything goes wrong. The daughters who have been raped by their stepfather start to be steps of teenagehood because she has been introduced to intimate matter, so she is intimate with matter. Pink or grey, she cares less because favorite colors don't exist in the world anymore, for it is dark, with no beam of light shining through to bring meaning. Their flamboyant ways are to those who have been left in the wilderness with no return, left to swing down poles and be borrowed by a man who carry their shame in their trousers and feel they need to be philanthropists, spread the disease. And yet, churchgoers still have to label them prostitutes as if they haven't heard enough of that. Even their makeup asks the same word. What happens when everything goes wrong?
What happens when Africa's daughters have used his son as an excuse to dress like merchants? Birthing industries, children become income in the shape of grants. And absent fathers are hailed as pseudo-farmers, sowing generations of whipping willows, ripping widows. What happens when generations has taken the seat of worship? When the young no longer see prayer as worship? What happens when the prodigal returns only to find that home does not have walls big enough to embrace him? When he swears that the sun sets to steal his dreams? When the search and rescue team is lost, how shall we find our way when compass needles no longer point due north? When God shakes the ground to expose the evils residing under our carpets, like the flurry of fetus is abruptly uprooted in the name of a future, when man master carnage and graduate puppets, the Grim Reaper no longer visits hoods in fear for his soul, so he works on consignment. What happens when everything goes wrong? There'll come a time when earthquakes begin to swallow the children whole and the seas invade our homes. When hailstones become stones thrown at the inhabitants of the earth. When Armageddon becomes graffiti in the skies. When the African sun begins to eat the skins of suns. When whirlpools uproot mountains like roses picked at harvest time. And finally, the mountains will move but not because of our faith. When volcanoes erupt and lava covers our streets, we won't stand the heat. What happens when everything goes wrong? There'll come a time when orphanages become concentration camps. When kids play with syringes covered in AIDS because they think suicide's a game. When abortion clinics become hangout spots for teens. When being an adult means committing adultery. When trash cans become coffins stuffed with the carcasses of dead babies. What happens when everything goes wrong?
But what happens when crime suspects are convicted of their crimes and are sentenced to double life in prison? What happens is prison sentences are mistaken for immortality, hence the appreciation of gangster wars, murder cases, and acts discriminating other races. Jury, who's our number one? Be more judgmental than sentimental. Aren't we tired of all the happenings around us, Your Honor? Have we ever wondered what would happen if the sun doesn't set? We haven't because we are too excited about the day is dying in the west and rising in the east as we get up to no good, as we do no good. The CPU's unplugged. Please wait as the computer's about to configure. We live in that world where I have you on BBM, WhatsApp, and follow you on Twitter, yet a smile and a hello is absent when we pass each other by the streets. That's technology, oh. Nothing is wrong. We are just upgrading, advancing, socializing. And the list goes on and on and on until our phones go off. Something is wrong. It is sad that it takes podcasts for us to realize that. What do we do? Who or what is charged? What happens when everything goes wrong?
What happens when there's no longer a question, when it has become a state of being, when wolves no longer hide behind sheep's clothing, but boldly speak from behind podiums and pulpits, when men of color seek to paint the town red, literally using a fresh coat of white blood, when breathing becomes a crime against humanity, when we exchange virtues for vanity, morals for mortuaries. What happens when the young no longer need to leave the state to return in body bags because wars are fought in their backyards, when sorrow is born of holy hands, men love according to skin color? What happens when teenagers become instrumentalists, using razor blades to play their wrists like violins, when the sky cannot stand the bloodshed, so stars drop dead on Earth's lap? What happens when the angels hush their singing so God can cry in silence, when lightning becomes a herald for the angel of death and thunder his calling card? What happens when society comes crashing down like a house of cards and we simply have to deal with it? What happens when everything goes wrong?
There'll come a time when smog clouds township skies like 1976 uprisings, when shebeens become crime scenes and gravesites, when the epidemic of absent fathers begins to rise, and weeping mothers witness their tears evaporate into tear gas. What happens when everything goes wrong? There'll come a time when financial systems will collapse and our fathers will fill unemployment lines, when suicidal degrees hang themselves on our walls and become useless, when hunger leaves holes in our stomachs, when the river Nile dries up and thirst begins to kill us, and we say things like, Africa, let's cry ourselves to sleep and wedge the sheets, for we haven't seen riverbeds in a while. Africa, let's cry ourselves to sleep, for the world has clogged its ears with coins we could have used to buy bread. Let's take flight in fighter jets with empty stomachs. Let's hunger strike Africa. Let's crack open hourglasses and spill the content therein. Let's sponge blood onto the ground. Let's use pocket-sized daggers to split grains of sand. Let's kill time until time we become Sipho. What happens when everything goes wrong?
We pray.
Do me. What happens when everything goes wrong?
We pray.
We pray.